Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show. Dear listener, a note before we begin. This podcast will be discussing childhood sexual abuse and incest, which you may find distressing or uncomfortable. If you are affected, please call the Samaritans 24-hour hotline in Hong Kong on 2896 0000 or call your local crisis line or lifeline in the country that you live in. Today I'm here with Karina Calver. Hi Karina, thanks for joining us today.
Hi there, it's nice to be here.
I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about your life growing up.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Hong Kong, so I've lived here all my life. I lived in Chim Cha Choy. I've got a brother and my parents. I went to a local primary school, and that was interesting to say the least. One of which, because I think back in the 70s and 80s, being brown wasn't so accepted in a local school. So it was kind of weird back then. But I mean, looking back now, it's like, I understand what all that meant because it was just really ignorance. But so that part was a bit difficult. And then I later on moved to a private school and that really brought a lot of strength in me. So yeah, that's a snapshot of my past.
And can you tell me your cultural background?
Sure. I'm Indian, Sindhi to be specific. My parents are both not directly from India. Like my mom was born and raised in Indonesia. My dad was born in India but raised in Japan. And then they got arranged married and came to Hong Kong.
Oh, wow. So
yeah.
Were their arranged marriage was over in India?
Yeah, it was really bizarre. But I think from what I was told that my dad saw a picture of my mom and that was it. And that's kind of how it was. They didn't see each other until the day of the wedding.
Wow, that's really hard to imagine, isn't it?
Yeah. In a way, it's quite sad because my parents are not together anymore. And they're just a mixed fit. They don't belong together. They're just opposites that don't match. I think that had it not been that way, they wouldn't have chosen each other.
And did you feel that from a young age that they didn't really match and they weren't a good match?
Oh, totally. Because my dad was pretty much a womanizer from the moment I could remember. And so it was really hard because my mom wasn't strong enough to voice out or to really do much about it. So she kind of just let it be in a way, and I knew she was very unhappy, but she didn't do much about it, which was really sad. So it's he could kind of get away with murder. And they both married really young. I think they were 20 or 21.
That's so young.
Yeah. So I think it was out of pressure as well.
And have you ever spoken to either of them about having an arranged marriage?
Well, I know that because I'm the only daughter in the whole of my family. Even my grandparents have no daughters. My uncle has no daughters. So it was all their hopes and expectations were sort of put on me. So I had to get arranged, but I also had to marry someone within the Sindhi community. But it also had to be of a certain status and a certain class and the whole works, right?
This was you?
This was for me.
So you've had an arranged marriage?
I haven't, but they expected it.
Oh, right.
So I have experience going to India with my grandparents when I was in my 20s. I was there for 3 months. I experienced what it was like to be rejected and reject men. Because you just go through a shopping list of men walking through, or sort of calling with matchmakers and then you go and meet them, but not alone. It's always with a whole bunch of people. So it's really awkward. You have your grandparents and uncle and aunties and whoever else, and you have this guy with a whole bunch of his people. And you're just sitting there being examined. It was bizarre.
So you went through this process with a number of men?
Yeah.
And you either said no or they said no?
Yeah. But I knew deep down this wasn't the time for me. I knew so well that I was so not ready for marriage. And I also knew I was never going to get arranged, regardless of what my family wanted of me.
But did you feel they were really pushing you into that? So you had to go through this process?
It was just going through the motion. But of course, it was very hard for me because when I came back, I actually was depressed for a while. Because I felt oh my God, I wasn't worthy enough of any man.
Yeah.
Forgetting the fact that I rejected some as well. But there was this one guy I thought he was good looking. I mean, I didn't know any better back then. I was he was really good looking, but he rejected me. So I'm not good enough for a good catch, So it's really weird. And then when you have the aunties and uncles who are really old saying, you rejected this really good guy. They would sing about it and go on about it for years after. he's now really successful and, he got married. You should have really chosen him. Like, I would hear that later on. So I really felt like, oh my God, did I screw up? Did I make a bad choice? Because you don't really know how to make decisions at 20-ish, right? And you kind of been told to follow suit because that would make them happy. And if they're happy, you should be happy. But that was really not my definition of life. That it should be, if I'm happy, they should be happy and not the other way around. So it was really hard. But I knew one thing, that my grandma always said to my dad, that I can't handle your daughter. She's really stubborn. So we're sending her back to Hong Kong.
Oh, so this was after you'd met these men and there was this process going on, and then they were like, okay, we've had enough. Yeah. You're coming back, because we couldn't find her a husband. Yeah. How long were you in India for?
About 3 months.
And after 3 months, they were like, okay, see you later. And how did you feel then? Were you relieved to be coming back, or did you feel disappointed you'd let people down, or all of that?
Both. I was really happy, because like whenever my parents would call, I was really happy they called, and I would use Cantonese with my dad because any other language they understood. And I'm like, Dad, I need to get back. This is not working. In hindsight, I understand where my grandparents were coming from, but they didn't know me at that point in my life. So I just felt like, you know what? I know I'm not ready. Dad, you just need to bring me back. Like, let me go back now. Like, change my ticket,
And was he receptive to those pleas?
No. I had to, I don't know what. I think at some point, maybe because my ticket expired or whatever, but like, come 3 months and then I went back.
And you said you had a brother.
I do have a brother.
Was he expected to have an arranged marriage as well?
No, I think because, like I said, everyone in our family are all boys. So there was less of pressure for the boys to be anything or do anything besides just, like make sure you work and provide and all that stuff. But there was hardly any expectation of any of the boys in the family. So the focus was always on me growing up. Like, I had to be very feminine, and I had to learn how to cook like Indian food. I had to learn, like table manners, and I had to learn how to serve men and all that kind of stuff. And I always felt like, why me? Why not him? Why not my brother? We're both the children of my parents. So I always felt like it was me. Of course, now when I look back, I'm glad my grandma was so brutal during that time, because I had skills that my brother doesn't, or some of the girls don't. So right now I really appreciate it. But when I was young, I didn't understand any of it, And I think that's her way of teaching me. She was quite Hitlerish, but that's how she knew, So it was fine. Now it's fine, of course.
And did your grandma live in India, or was she in Hong Kong as well?
Like they lived in Yokohama in Japan. That's where my dad was from, right? So my grandparents still lived there, but they came to Hong Kong a lot. So they were shifting between Yokohama and Hong Kong, because my grandparents had 2 children, my dad and a younger brother. He had a younger brother. So they would constantly be with him, and then they would come here to be with us. So it's kind of like they wanted to make sure all their grandchildren were getting a bit of them. You know what I mean?
And did this pressure come more from your grandmother than your parents?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that culturally
it's
typical?
It's very typical, especially because I'm carrying their last name, right? So it's like I'm her daughter pretty much. And because she didn't have a daughter, she felt the need to give me all the right values, all the right ways of being, because she also felt my mom wasn't good enough. The moment my mom married my dad, even though my mom came from a really wealthy family, she felt my mom didn't have the characteristics or just the skill set of being a wife. And so she felt my mom was failing as being a mother.
So this is her mother-in-law, and she was disappointed with her. But wasn't it arranged marriage by the parents?
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah,
so
but she almost expected, like, she would always say when there was, like, friction in the kitchen, she'd be like, I don't understand what your mom taught you. But I don't think she was sensitive enough to understand that my grandma, from my mom's side, had 4 children, and she didn't have a husband, and she was running the business and running the family. So I think my mom was just kind of left on the side. So there was no focus given to my mom. So my mom didn't learn any skills. So is it really my grandma's fault? You know what I mean? So it's hard to say, but I think my grandma from my dad's side just said, you know what, you're not fit to be this mother. And so she was really harsh on my mom. So she felt like it was her responsibility to make sure I learned how to sew. I learned how to make chapati, like all those things, and I would rebel all the time. But it was hard to rebel with her. She was very strong.
And then was the pressure for the arranged marriage for you from your grandmother or your parents, or both?
A lot more from my grandparents, but even from my parents. Because the thing is, I don't know why, but the moment I turned 18, they were like, actually, no, even before, when I was like 17 or something. So when I was in year 11, because I went to American International, so they have year 12. And my dad's like, okay, you're not gonna go to year 12. And I'm like, what do you mean? I need to graduate high school. And they're like, no, I can't afford it. And this and that and the other. And my dad already by then had a second family. So it's a bigamist. And he had a daughter because I had seen them all the time. Do you know what I mean? It's weird.
Can you explain how you knew that this family existed?
Okay, my dad was really good at... He's a sweet talker. He's a charmer by default. Even though he doesn't look great, he's really good with his words. So it was really easy for him to get women attention. That's number one. But number two is because he knew how to sweet talk when I was a kid, he knew how to make me feel like my mom was in the wrong all the time. So he won me, but not my brother. So there was already a split in the family between who was whose favorite. Do you know what I mean? So my mom didn't like me because I was close to my dad. But she felt like my dad was a bad person because they had a lot of marital problems, right? And because I was kind of on my dad's side, it made it easier for him to sort of like tell me about this other woman. And then eventually it's not just telling me, it's bringing me over and all that kind of stuff.
That must have been so difficult as a child.
Yeah.
How old were you?
Oh, God, it started... See, I've seen a few of his women, but the one that he's still with, I saw her like probably when I was in year 7 or year 8 for sure. Maybe even earlier, but I vividly remember me and his wife, maybe you can call her, going to some, is it Giordano or Sports Act to buy PE clothes and PE stuff because it was start of the school year. And one of my best friends was with me. She's like, oh, that's so cool that she's buying you that bag. Oh my God, you know? So I vividly remember that. So I knew, and that was just year 8. Right. And I already had that bond, that relationship with her. So I must have known her before that.
Wow, that's a lot to take in for somebody so young. And did you have to keep this a secret from your mum?
Yeah. My mom knew that something was going on. And that's why she was mad at me. Because it's like, why am I supporting it almost? But I was just dying for attention and love, right? Wherever I got it, it didn't matter.
You're only a child.
Exactly. And my mom wasn't giving it to me. So if this woman is giving me some love, whether it's a form of a present, so be it.
So how did your dad balance the two families?
Pretty badly, I would say. He would get up really early when he normally doesn't and say he's going, like going to the gym. He wasn't. He was going to spend time with them. So he was basically financially supporting two families. And that was emptying our bank accounts, in the years later on. And
he had children with this other woman that are your half-siblings?
Yeah.
How many did he have?
One. He's got one with...
The daughter?
Yeah.
And do you have a relationship with her?
No, sadly no, because I think there was a lot of grudge. I never really expressed it, but there was, because a lot of my Barbies and my novels all went to her, and I wasn't done with them. So I felt like that's not fair. Is she the better daughter? Like, why? So I felt again like I wasn't good enough. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So it reinforced a lot of like doubt in who I am as a person.
Well, it's interesting sometimes the feelings that we get and we develop as a child reoccur later as an adult. And you can see the connection between that not feeling good enough and not worthy. And then again with the whole arranged marriage thing when you're an adult.
Exactly.
So that's very interesting and I know those feelings reappear.
Because I've had to go through a lot of therapy myself before I became a counselor. But I realized that this whole idea about not feeling good enough went up until adulthood, up until when I was in my 30s, with men, with relationship. Because if you go through not just that, but I'll talk about something else later on, it actually just goes back into that very fundamental value that you think of yourself, which is I'm not worthy of love or attention or whatever it is. And it's almost like until I didn't fix that, it was constantly going to reoccur because I'm going to constantly find things to make me feel I wasn't good enough.
You had a very traumatic experience when you were a young girl. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I actually don't know. It was 5 or 6. I was talking to my husband about it. He said it might have been even younger because we were talking about little details a while back. So basically, like I said, my dad was a womanizer. So my mom, and I remember vividly, she would talk about how sex is bad. And she would say like, oh, he always wants too much of it. And he's a sex maniac. And so like, I'm not even sure how it occurred, but he turned to me, and I was like, 5 or 6 perhaps. And I don't actually remember when it first started, but I remember lots of episodes of me being in my parents' bedroom and being raped. Yeah.
This is your dad?
My dad. biological dad.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like I remember many episodes. And I also know, like, obviously later on in my life, when I started dating, there were times I'm just like, I couldn't get too intimate with men because I was just like, no. So I would just kind of pull off. But
That's completely understandable given what you'd gone through. So how long did that continue for?
Long time. Till my 20s. Basically what happened was in my mid-20s, my dad did something that was really stupid. I'm not even sure what he did really, but he kind of literally emptied our bank accounts. And we were doing really well financially, but to the point we owed people money. So, because he had a business and a lot of it was set up by my grandparents, or my granddad. And he just really had to keep it rolling, right? But obviously supporting 2 families, plus he traveled a lot with her, and did lots of stuff. So at some point, he just really emptied us. And I only found this out because a few times my mom kept saying she couldn't find the key to her bank safe deposit box. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, it has to be there. We only keep it in the same spot. She's like, it's not there. I can't even find the key to my deposit box, like the safe box at home. And I'm like, okay, now this is really weird. And we would always blame my mom for being like absent-minded, but this is not absent-mindedness. So I then asked my dad, he said, oh, it's in the office. I'm like, okay, I'll go to the office with you and get the key because mom is getting really, frantic about it. And he's like, no, don't worry about it. But then he started losing his cool. Then I knew something was up and I'm like, what's the story, right? And he's like, I have the key. I'm like, okay, great. So just hand it over, right? If you have the key. He goes, no, I have everything that's in the box. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And then he had to tell us because I was like, if you don't tell me right now, I'm calling grandpa because he was really scared of his parents. And he's like, I pawned all the jewelry. My mom had a lot of jewelry, like a lot of diamonds. Being Indian, it was like customary, especially when you get married. So she had a lot, worth so much money. My mom was bawling because that's all her asset.
How devastating.
Yeah. So we called my grandparents and my grandpa's like, how much, are we talking about? He's like, oh, I think if you just give me $1 million, I'll be okay. It was not $1 million. It was like 4 or 5 times more. And this is more than 15 years ago.
That's
so
a lot of money.
For back then, it's a lot. I mean, it's still a lot of money today, but it was a lot for like 15 years ago.
And that's just the jewelry that was gone.
Oh, the money is gone. And he also owed people money. Like jewelers.
And do you have any idea why he did this?
No clue.
Even to this day, you don't know.
Like, I keep wondering, right? Like, did he transfer all the money? Because, you pawn it, you get the cash. Did he transfer all of it to the Philippines account? Because he has a nice house there. Because I had to scoop, and I have a friend who lives there. So I had to scoop and find out where he lives. And I'm like, okay, his house is pretty decent. But then whenever we used to speak to him back then, like a few years before, because now I don't talk to him. I just decided, and I told him straight up. But prior to that, I used to speak to him and he used to make it sound like his life was really rough. He was eating food from, like he was growing his own food and he barely had enough to eat. And it was like he was really suffering. He made it sound like it was that. And he even came to my brother's wedding about 6 years ago. And he basically wore like the oldest clothes he owned, which was back from like when we were together as a family. And I was like, I'm sure that's not his state. He was making it to seem like, oh, poor me, look at me, So he actually told my brother, could you buy me clothes when you guys go to India for the wedding shopping? And I told my brother, you're not buying him clothes, right? He goes, it doesn't matter, just a shirt or two. And I'm like, it does. The guy's not poor, man. But he's like, no, I don't want to fuss over it. So I'll get in like a couple of outfits for the wedding. And I saw there was no remorse, none whatsoever. He actually pretended in front of my mom's family like everything was fine. He was talking to my mom's brothers and they hated his guts, right? But he was talking to them like, no big deal. And he came close to me and I'm like, don't you even dare. Like, don't even come close. Because I was like obviously well dressed because it's my brother's wedding. And he's trying to be all like, oh, let's take a photo and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, you want to back off? Because I'm going to punch you right now. Like, I don't care if I create a scene, so don't make a scene. But he would try like in front of my grandma because my grandma right now, she's like the world for me. Like, I would do anything for her. So in front of her, he'd be like, try to talk to me. And I'm like, I look at him, I'm like, don't try. Not in front of her. Because then I would feel because she didn't know what happened.
That's what I was going to ask you. Who out of the rest of the family knows about what he had done with the money and to you?
Well, for the money part, no one knew.
Right.
Right? And I think it's still a mystery, and it always will be. What he did to me, I opened up, I think, just like maybe about half a year before I got married.
So only recently?
Yeah, about 4 years ago.
So did you never reach out for help or tell anyone what was going on with your dad when you were little?
I did tell. The funny thing is, when I started telling my husband a lot more about all this stuff, he knew it from the day one because I felt it was right for him to know. But when I felt like, okay, you know what, I want to do a bit more work on what happened to me. So I went back to seeing my therapist, or rather a new therapist. And so I come back and I would work on myself. And I thought, you know what? I want to just check in with this one person I had told back when I was in high school. And funny enough, years before that, I could never find her. Like I was Googling, Facebooking, couldn't find her.
Friend or a teacher?
Teacher.
Okay.
Yeah. And coincidentally, a classmate of mine said, hey, you're looking for Jillian Dobbs. She's changed her whole name and this is where she is. And I'm like, oh my God, I would have never found her because her name is like more Indonesian with the Buddhist kind of twist or Hindu twist rather. I was like, brilliant. So I found her. And then I was like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy to see you. Da, da, da. I'm like, can we do a Skype? She's like, of course. And I miss you. Da, da, da. And she was like my favorite teacher, obviously. And I had back then told her everything. And I was crying. She was crying. And I remember saying that to her. But when you're so much older, you don't really know if that was real. You sometimes doubt if this event even took place. Because I'm like, I'm fairly normal, So did this really happen? Or have I just fabricated this? So we had a Skype session and I was like, hey, do you know back in like year 11, I told you this stuff. Can you just tell me what I told you? If you remember any of it. And she told me pretty much word for word. And we both were just crying our eyes out. She's like, no, it was all real. Let me tell you what I remember. And she was telling me everything, and my husband was right there.
What did she remember?
She remembered that I would tell her what happened in terms of like how you would say, this is just education. Like I'm teaching you how to be a good wife. So you need to know how this works. So you're still a virgin. Because that was the biggest thing for me. I always thought I was a virgin. Because he was very good. Because the thing with being Indians is we were told that we couldn't have sex before marriage. So he made it sound like even though he was penetrating, he wasn't. I didn't know any better. So I was like, okay, this is good for you because you need to make sure your husband's always happy. And that's your job and that's your role. So I'm now, giving you that instruction and I'm teaching you that. So I remember that vividly. And she told me that again. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I remember hearing that a lot.
And what did she do with that information? Did she tell you?
What did she do with the information?
Like when you spoke to her, did she tell anyone else? Did she try to help?
She did. She said to me, why don't you, there was a few things she said. One was, can you come and live with me right now? I think emotionally she was just so upset. She's like, come and live with me now. And I said, I can't do that. I can't leave my home, like my family, because I was still a kid. I didn't understand maybe the damage that it was causing me. But also, obviously now I know what it did to me. But back then I had no clue. But also I couldn't see a way out. I felt like that was just how it was, and I didn't know what other girls my age were going through. So maybe it was norm. I don't know.
Well, it had been happening for such a long time from the age of 5 onwards. So I'm sure it became very sort of normal, didn't it?
Yeah. And so I didn't know any better.
You didn't realise it. Yeah, exactly. And that can happen to a lot of young people.
Yeah. Then she said, we need to call the police. I'm like, no, we can't because I had the most stupidest arguments like, okay, who's going to take care of us as a family? Because my dad was a provider, right? And I'm like, I can't and I need to finish school and he's the one paying for my school. So there was all these weaker sort of arguments to keep this quiet. And then she's like, okay, you need to go to university. You need to go to okay, why don't you apply to these schools? So she helped me with that. She goes, okay, and I said, yeah, but I can't afford college unless my dad pays for it. And he was very anti me going to school. Like college was a no-no, right?
Yeah, because you were just supposed to get married.
That's it.
And look after your husband.
Exactly. So when I was in year 12, I applied without them knowing, right? And my mom was completely against me being my own woman because she's not. So she didn't see why I should, right? Maybe it was the fact that, she wasn't happy with her life, but I think at some point she didn't want me to be happy as well. I don't know why, but even till today, now we don't talk, but at some point before that, she was just like, when I was happy, she couldn't quite get it or feel for me. So it was really bizarre. So it's kind of twisted in that sense. So she was very against me going to uni, you know? So I had to apply, but I was very sneaky about it, right? And I got accepted. And I told my dad, and he's like, well, you're not going anyway. So I had my teacher tell my dad during like PTA. And he's like, yeah, you can. He's like, okay. You know, I think he was really good at sweet talk. He's like, yeah, sure. She's doing really well at school. You know, you should send her. But yeah, sure. So I said, oh, Dad, am I really going? When we went home, he's like, of course not. I'm like, but you just said that to Jillian. He goes, yeah, well, I can say whatever I want to her. You're not going.
And you didn't go?
I didn't. I only went to uni when I was 28.
Oh, how sad.
But I had to save every penny. So I was working. Yeah, it's a long story, but so when my parents split up, basically.
When was that?
That was 26, 27.
Right.
Or I think 26. And to comfort my mom, she could only think of being with her mother, which was in Indonesia. So my brother stayed in Hong Kong because he had a job. And my dad decided to leave and go and live with his family, obviously. So he went to Philippines. So my mom and I went to Jakarta. We stayed there for about, 8, 9 months. And I hated it. It was hell for me. But it also showed me how people can be. In hindsight, I realized it's so easy to say one is family. But when shit hits the fan, are you really there? I mean, they were there. We had the accommodation. But it's also the fact that I was definitely in pain, you know. And not just the fact that I lost half my family, but the fact that there was so much going on, I didn't know how to deal with it, you know. Rape was not even talked about. It was still very much not mentioned.
And your mum didn't know anything about it?
Oh, she's the one who made this happen, I know.
What do you mean? Okay,
so going back to how the fact that I was young, right? My mom was very anti-sex and my dad was very pro-sex. So where's he going to get it from? I mean, yeah, he had this mistress, right? Now wife, supposedly. But at home. So that's where it happened. But the thing is, my mom would always sleep in my room. Where the hell am I going to go? I was going to go there. And she knew because there were times I vividly remember her entering the bedroom and giving me the look and then going out. Do you know what I mean? So, but yet she said nothing. And I also knew, I remember vividly getting bad treatment, you know, like being in the receiving end of like just attitude. So like, obviously I did something wrong. But did I? Because you kind of instigated it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
It's so convoluted. I mean, it's very difficult as a child because none of it is your fault or your responsibility. And that's what you've got to take away from that.
Exactly. And I was just like, if you didn't want to have sex, you had to be strong enough to say, you know what? I'm not having sex, but this is my bedroom. This is where I'm sleeping. Right? And that's my children. You dare. Right? That shouldn't even be a thought. But to her, clearly, if it wasn't her, it doesn't matter who else he was having it with, even if it was her own child. Because she knew, you know, and I did talk to her in front of my sister-in-law recently, a few years ago.
Oh, what happened with that conversation?
She just cried and said sorry. And I said, sorry to what? That you knew about this all along? And you did this to me? What are you sorry about? My sister-in-law was like, she was there as a witness because I just like, you know, I want it to be clear, right? And she's like, yeah, but it was your fault because you let this happen. Like you were always clingy to your dad. And I'm like, Let's go back to the fact that you always slept in my room, right? And you never actually... you should have stopped this for Christ's sake, man. This is your husband and I'm your child. Like, how is this even right in any sense? You know, like if you look at it anyway.
And did she understand that?
She was mute because she had nothing. What can she say? I mean, think about it, right? She said nothing.
It must be terrible to have to live with that.
Yeah. But the worst part was, I think she said sorry because she didn't want to, because the thing is, I was very good at handling everything. Like I'm a fixer. So if she had a broken TV or whatever, I'll sort it out. So I would sort all her crap out. So the moment she knew I realized what damage she had done to me, I cut contact. And it meant she lost me as a support network. So I think she was trying to fix that support network more than really being sorry for what she did to me.
Right, I understand, yeah. You've cut contact with her now.
Yeah.
How long's that been going on for?
It's been about 9-10 months.
Oh, that's all. Really, it's all very recent.
Yeah. There's a lot of changes in my life in the past few years. A lot. Because the more I step back and notice what's been going on, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, it's just, it wasn't right. Like, I don't have to. It's okay to end relationship if it's toxic, you know? But more than that, I realize what I need. but it took me that long to figure out, okay, what do I need? What makes me happy? Who are adding happiness to my life or who are draining me? Besides even the rape thing, I put it aside and I was fine with hanging out with her because it wasn't like when I saw her, I thought of the rape. I didn't, but it's more the fact that she couldn't be happy for me. And it was more that I felt this is a toxic relationship.
What do you mean she couldn't be happy for you?
For starters, when I decided to move out, totally not happy.
So you'd live with your mum right up until you met your husband?
Yeah. I moved out soon after. Like, I met my husband and it was about 9 months, and then I moved out. But prior to that, I would stay half the time in my flat with my mom and my brother before he got married, and then half the time with my husband.
But that was before you got married?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, before even I got engaged.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she didn't really like that. Because it's not a norm in our society, in our culture, to live out before marriage, right? So she thought I was just being a black sheep. I was doing all the things that I shouldn't do and dating a white boy, like seriously. And then
how did that go down?
No, it didn't go down really well. My grandma later on, when she knew I was engaged to him, she was so happy.
Oh, that's
Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah.
But my mom was in Indonesia when he proposed. So the right thing to do was to call her and say, hey, guess what? He proposed. And her response was, okay. I'm like, this is supposed to be happy news. Like, she was really flat and I was so hurt, right?
Must have been disappointing.
I was so disappointed, but I was just like, did she understand me? Right? And then she hung up, right? And then I called my grandma. And I think I was really sad. So I think I just settled with that. And then I changed my Facebook status and I put engaged and everyone was like, da, 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 da. Like the whole world started congratulating me. And I think it went to my mom. And then I also spoke to my brother and he was really happy for me because he's just like, he wanted to make sure it was solid, right? Because he's very old school. And by then he was already married.
Did he marry an Indian girl?
Yeah. But he picked his own girl.
Right.
Yeah. And she's a sweetheart. She's a really nice girl. So I called my grandma and she was so happy. She was just like, oh, I'm like, but Ma, did you hear me? He's a white boy. And she's like, yeah, and?
Oh,
are you happy?
Lovely.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm happy. And then I think prior to telling her, I told my uncle, who's like my father, brother, everything, my dad's younger brother. And I sent them photos and stuff because they always wanted to know more about him. But I was very discreet. This is the only relationship I didn't tell a lot of people, probably a handful, if at all. I was very discreet about what I was doing. Unlike me, usually. And so I finally sent a picture of me and him, and they just loved him. And so they showed that picture to her, to my grandma. And they're like, this is who she's with. And they're like, oh, he's such a nice boy. Like, he's got such a kind face. And so they were going on and on. So when I spoke to her, she's like, I know who he is. He's such a good man. I'm really happy. Are you happy? And I'm like, yeah, I'm so happy for you. And that just, I started crying out of happiness because that's what I wanted from my mother. But I got it from my grandma. I'm glad I got it, but really, it made it more obvious as to where my mom stood. But then later on, I think a couple of hours later, she called back. She was, oh, congratulations. Da, da, da. Now, then there was a whole line of people in the family who wanted to talk to me and say congratulations. So I'm like, okay, that's great, Mom. But you know what? A bit too late. Like when I called you, because you're the first one I called, that's what I got. So...
disappointing.
Of course.
And so did your mum or your dad come to your wedding?
We decided not to really do a wedding, like a whole shebang of stuff. So we just went to the registry and we signed. And obviously my brother, my dad, no. My dad wanted to. And I said to him straight up, I said, if you even dare enter Hong Kong, I'm going to call the cops. And I'm not joking about it. So you don't call me. Don't ask about me. Don't dig and ask anyone how I'm doing. When's my wedding? You're not invited.
You're listening to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm talking to Karina Calver about her life. Karina's going to share with us what happened when she confronted her father about the years of abuse. Does he know why you have this feeling towards him? He understands. Have you actually confronted him about what he did to you when you were young?
Definitely. What I did was, so like I said, I was going through therapy. One day I called him and yelled the crap out of him. I said, do you know the damage you've done to me? I'm fine now, but that's not the point. Like, you ruined my life. Thank God. I really believe that my faith and because I was always very spiritual from a young age. And I think that was my grandma's influence. So it kind of kept me sane. I said, most people probably would be in the mental asylum. I said, I'm really blessed to be normal, but you really screwed me up. So I was just like, do you even know what you did? Like, do you know that's one of the biggest sin? Like, you could actually, like, not only a sin, but it's a crime. I could put you in bars forever. Like, you could have life sentence. Do you get that? And your wife, i.e. my mom, she could join you too. Because she actually made this happen. Because if she stopped it as a parent, this wouldn't have gone any further. So I could even, press charges against both of you. And he's like, yeah, I know, I'm really sorry. And this is also on text, so I have it, saved. Because I'm really sorry. I've been praying for you and wanting to wish you well all the time. And, and there's not a day that I don't pray for you. I'm like, you know what? You can pray all you want. I still had to suffer.
Yeah.
So
doesn't change what's happened.
Cut that out, right? But because I also wanted written proof, if I ever wanted to go to the cops, if I ever wanted to press charges or to tell my family, which I did, I have something on paper. So when I decided to tell like my grandma and his younger brother, who's like my brother/dad, and all his children, who I'm like super close to. So basically everyone in the family, right? And that including my brother and my sister-in-law. So when so I emailed all of them and I told them all, attaching that message, that text message. They were all so shocked. And they started, because I was still going through therapy at that point. So they called me and they're like, oh, wait a minute. What was that? Like, I don't understand. I'm like, yeah. They're like, really? And you never said a soul? I'm like, yeah, I didn't say nothing. They're like, oh my God, so they were like all really shocked. And I said, okay, now one thing is, obviously my grandma doesn't have computers or anything. She was like back then she was 80 something, right? She's 90 now. I'm like, you need to ease grandma into this. I don't want her to die or get a heart attack, right? So just ease her into it. And so I spoke to her. And then the first question after she said was, where was your mom? Because this happened at home. Where the hell was your mom? So another reason to blame my mom, which I don't blame her, right? Like she was okay. Yeah, he did wrong. But where was she? She could have stopped this. And I'm like, I don't know. Another room sleeping, And then she's like, you okay? I'm like, I'm okay. And that was really the end of it because I think it was too painful for her, right? And I said, Mama, I'm fine. So I had to make her okay because I knew she's old,
Of course.
And I didn't want it to kill her, right? So that was really important for me for my own closure and to not hide anymore. So that's why I was fine. I even did an interview a while ago about all this, but more about, not so much about what happened, but in a way I'm really glad. Not that glad that it happened, but in a way it's made me who I am. Do you know what I mean? Because now I'm a counselor. Why? Do you know, I work with people who've gone through trauma. Why? Do you know? Because I understand the dynamics of the complexities of healing. I understand that each time you reflect, you learn a little more. And you don't look at it subjectively anymore. You're not emotional about it because you've actually done all that work. But you understand why you react the way you do, or if you have moments of insecurity, where does it really stem from? And that's really important. So I think all of this, even though was difficult, was very painful, in hindsight, it's taught me so much. It's kind of made me the strong woman I am. So
I can see that. How important was it for you to seek out therapy and get support for what you've been through?
A lot. It was very important. I did it when I first went back to uni. Like I said, I went to uni at 28 and I had to fund myself. And I was also lucky to get a lot of support from the government. So I got grants and stuff because I was very persistent about going back to school. I didn't want to just be a secretary or whatever. That's what I was, And then I got a job as a TA at Carmel, this Jewish American school. Loved it. And they really gave me that push. And they said, you know what? You shouldn't be doing this. You're set out to be a teacher. And I was like, I have to go to school for that. And I can't go to school. I'm 28. In my head, 28 is too old for anything but marriage. And you're old for marriage too. Because that's really the Sindhi way of looking at life, He's like, no, you should. That was the headmaster. I'm like, okay, I wouldn't know what the hell to do. I don't even know how to start. And I was getting all the support I needed from Carmel and from the kids and just everyone. Because I was a TA for grade 1 and grade 2. And they were just adorable, But it made me feel like this was the starting point. So I did all the paperwork and I only applied to HKU. I got in, it was no problem. And then I had 4 years full-time studying and having to make sure I pay for it too, even though I got some grant. So I did a lot of tutorial. but I think it was a turning point in my life. And then when I was at HKU, that's when there's a whole lot of medical center, wellness, and everything's really dirt cheap as a student. So I was able to get help. And I saw a counselor for quite some time there, just to sort of talk about and go through this whole process of healing. I think everything really made more sense when I started dating my husband, because I had something more real, and then I could actually see where there was insecurities or where there was problems. Because when I was dating around, it still wasn't, it wasn't real. So I couldn't quite see where the problems were, coming up. So I needed to test things out. And I think that was the test that I had to figure out what was left that needed to be worked on.
And how have you changed from the girl before the therapy to the girl after the therapy?
Wow. I know my self-worth. I mean, that's for starters. I know who I am. I know where I stand in life. And I'm a go-getter. That girl back then had a lot of dreams, but I was very strong-minded and I knew what I wanted to be. But because I didn't have the education background to support it, I was also very afraid. I was very shy. I wasn't ready to talk to people. And that's changed massively. I mean, part of it's education, because I now have 3 degrees and I'm really proud. And I think I'll just keep going because that's one thing I love learning, whether it's in the form of being in a school or just, reading and whatnot. And that's something I never was given that opportunity. I think the more I didn't have it, I wanted even more,
So interesting that the expectation on you as a young girl was not to get any education, and now here you are, free to live your life the way you want.
Exactly.
And get an education.
Exactly. And I think the fact that I've decided how I want to live my life has empowered me and has made me feel like, nothing can really stop me. And I think that's what's changed. Because back then I didn't feel like I was enough. I needed the validation from a guy. I needed the validation from my brother or someone. I didn't feel like on my own, I knew who I was to some extent, I knew when I was giving into a guy and I knew that it wasn't right, but I would do it anyway. But right now it's different. I know my boundaries and I know my worth. And I think that's so important for women, regardless of whether or not you've been raped.
So important and so inspirational. So what would you recommend for anybody who's listening to this podcast and is in a difficult situation where they're not being treated well on some level? What would you suggest that they do?
Well, for starters, it depends on what they're going through, but I think therapy is really important. It's worked for me. And I do believe that you do need someone else who's a professional to sort of hear you, because they're seeing things differently. They're more objective for starters, right? So they'll be able to give you the tools that you need to help you navigate through what's going on. Because when you're sort of clouded into that problem, you can't see what's going on. And you can't really see the solutions either. I never thought in my life I would be where I am today. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it really takes getting the therapy you need for a long period of time, if necessary. But at least to get your mind in a better place, because then you can attract the right things. Your life starts to change. Because one of the biggest problems is we go through the patterns that we do because we don't break the pattern, especially when they're negative, right? So I always felt like I wasn't good enough. And that pattern stuck on for a decade, for a few decades. And I had to really change how I saw myself. And that became because of therapy.
If you could go back and talk to your younger self, what would you say to her?
I wish, for starters, really proud that, she was able to still live through all that and not kill herself, for one, so good on her. 2, I do wish that she stood up a little more for herself and said something without being so afraid. Someone with authority.
And I think that really comes back to my previous question about what people should do if they find themselves in a difficult situation where they're being mistreated by somebody. They should find somebody that they can trust and
Definitely.
a figure of authority and speak up and tell them and ask for help, whether it be a teacher or a doctor or another trusted adult or somebody in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Do reach out for help. It's not your fault.
Exactly.
And there are people out there that can help you. And at the end of this podcast, I'll give a couple of phone numbers of places that people can contact in Hong Kong.
Yes.
As well. Because I think it's important that we recognise that there may be listeners who are inspired by your story and want to seek help, and I'll provide some information.
Definitely. No, I think it's super important to get help. when you keep it to yourself, not only are you repeating it, in your mind again and again, but more importantly, you're not getting any outside help. You're not getting any input. So what you're doing is just going through the whole thing all over again, and you're analyzing, but it's not helping. So you're kind of stuck in that rut, right? So you need someone else to step in, and not just to hear you out, but give you a direction, and be able to sort of let it out. Because it's so healing just to get it out of your system, talk about it. Because I know that through therapy, I realized, oh my God, my mom is part of it. Or I realized that, I have certain issues that might have not been obvious because I hadn't seen it that way. So it really comes from that kind of work with someone else. And then you know what you can do from there on. But if you don't get the help in the first place, then it's really hard.
Then you're just stuck in the fog.
Exactly.
So what advice would you give to somebody who's experienced a trauma?
Get help. Seriously, get help. I mean, I know it seems very cliche because everyone says, get help. But it's so true. Like the things I know, especially in Hong Kong, people say, oh my God, like seeing a counselor, a psychiatrist or whatever, it means I've got a problem and someone needs to fix me. And it's not that, really, because we all aren't perfect, or we don't have all the tools for everything, whether it's IT or language or whatever. You all need someone to guide you. So what is so wrong if someone needs to guide you with your mental state of mind?
Exactly. If you have something wrong with you physically, you'll go and seek help for it.
Exactly.
You'll go to the physio or you'll go to the doctor, and you won't think twice about it.
Totally.
And this is one of the reasons why this podcast is so inspiring and so important, is for people to understand that if they need help for mental health issues, whatever it may be, anxiety or depression, there's so many different things. Just get it. You know, get the support and get the help. And there's places out there that will offer it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that because it's so important. I think the start of any sort of transformation comes with the fact that you get the help you need. Because you can't make better decisions if you're still stuck in that same pattern. If you're still looking at life in the way you are. You can't choose and notice anything better. I mean, I was constantly dating the wrong kind of guys. Why? Duh. Because I couldn't see any better. I was like, okay, guys are not really, kind or giving.
And you didn't feel worthy.
No, exactly. So it was a vicious cycle, right? But until I could break that chain and realize that, oh my God, that's what I've been doing forever. And it only comes from noticing all these things when you get the therapy for the bigger problem, because you'll realize what's a fundamental problem.
Do you think you'd be a counsellor now if you hadn't been through what you've been through during your life?
Probably not. I think I'm definitely very empathetic. I mean, I cry when I see kids cry, or especially animals now. I can totally resonate with problems that people face, mainly because I went through a lot myself. Whether it's my parents being separated or me going through rape. But it's given me the strength to understand that even that too, you can get through and you can come out the other end and have a great life. Because I love my life right now. And I never thought that would be true when I was 8 or 9. I couldn't picture my life, because it was a fuzz. It was blurry, right? I thought I'd be married to an Indian guy, but I wasn't sure how it's really going to be. I never thought this is going to be my life. And honest to God, it's brilliant. And I'm grateful. And I'm so grateful, but I'm also grateful to the fact that the right people were around because I seek the help I needed. So it goes back to the fact that you gotta voice out.
And that's a wonderful lesson for our listeners to learn, and why talking about these sort of issues, although they're, hard to hear and, it's quite heart-wrenching and controversial, difficult issues, but it's really important to hear people talk about them so that other people in the same situation can feel your strength and feel that there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Totally, there
and
is.
feel there's hope. And that there's help out there and that they don't have to be alone. And that's a massive thing. You're not alone and get help.
Exactly. That's one of the things I always felt was I was alone. And I think it's really important because I think what I did was I read a lot of books about what it's like to be raped, and the traumas behind it. So reading is really important. So you feel like you're not alone. That's one thing. And there's a lot of networking or not really networking, but there's forums where you can join and you get to hear what people are going through. So then you also feel okay, you know what? Sadly, this is happening a lot. So you don't feel like it's only you, and you can talk about it with other people. And that helps besides the fact that you seek a professional help. So I think it's having all the avenues and reading about it and understanding what to do is also useful.
And how did you know that what was going on was wrong? Or when did you know? How did you know that you could get help and that it wasn't right?
I think I knew deep down, but I wanted to believe otherwise. I'm not sure when per se, but like I knew when I told Jillian, for example, my teacher, when she started having that reaction and I cried, clearly I knew something was wrong. When I had that awkward moment with my mom, and I never understood why she didn't love me the same, and I still don't feel like there's love in any sort of way. But you know what? Like, I don't know if I can blame her because it's like, this whole podcast for me is not about pointing fingers. It's just purely my experience in my life journey. And till date, I have no anger towards her, because it's like, it's no point. She didn't know any better. She didn't like something. She didn't want it to happen to her. And so, okay, she wasn't really concerned about who else it was happening to because she didn't like it for herself. And that was her concern because she didn't understand what it was like to be, she didn't know how to be a mom because she never experienced her mom being maternal to her. So she didn't know what bonding was like. And I feel bad for her because she never experienced it for herself. So she doesn't know how to be empathetic, how to be a mom, none of that. The whole nurture thing, none of it. It just doesn't exist for her. And it's sad. So I can empathize, But I think it's really important that no matter what, like one needs to get help, because you have to network, you have to figure out what you need.
Can you tell me how you met your husband?
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's an amazing person. I met him. There was like this philosophy / spiritual, can we say, workshop that happened over a weekend. And he was there. And there was not a lot of Quailos, not a lot of foreigners. There was, I think, a couple, and the rest of them were all Indians. So it was really odd. Like, the white people just stand out. I'm like, oh, okay, that's weird. And so we're all just going in rotation, introducing ourselves. And he heard me and was like, oh, who's this American girl? So he was intrigued. So later on during break time, he came up to me and my girlfriend. And I was just like, oh, okay. So I was just chatting. I didn't even think anything. And I just kind of walked away because I wanted to go get a snack. But I wasn't really walking away. I just, excused myself. And he's like, oh, you didn't want to talk to me. I'm like, that was not the point, right? Like, I didn't even notice. Like, I was so oblivious to what was going on. And so I think that weekend we had a chance to really get to know each other. Like, not really get to know, but that's where it started. Because we had lunch once together, like with a bunch of people. And we realized, oh, we have quite a few things in common, like whether it was food or sport or whatever, And then I think the last day we had a chance to just me and him together. We had coffee, and they said, oh, I'd love to like have dinner with you tonight. I said, I can. It's Sunday. It's a family dinner. So I'm sorry. And he goes, okay, how about sometime this week? I said, sorry, I'm going to Mauritius for a meditation trip, a retreat. So I'll be gone for about 2 weeks. He's like, well, I just met you. And I'm like, yeah, but things happen, right? And it was kind of nice because first time in my life, I wasn't pursuing it. Normally, I'm always the one chasing the guy. And here, he was chasing me. And I'm like, all right, that's kind of cool. But I was taking a back seat because I really wanted to figure out, was this really right? I wasn't playing games. I wanted to know for me, what do I want? And even while I was getting to know him, and I'm like, okay, a lot of it was great. We're so similar and it's all very nice. But even then, I did tell him straight up when I met him, I said, I'm still not sure. There's this other guy I'm getting to know and I like him too. I'm being very honest. I just don't know what I want, which fits, for me. So I need some time. And I think that was really good for me because normally I would just go with the flow. Like if they want me, oh, yay, someone wants me, I'll just go with it. I didn't do that. And I think that's where I felt like I was taking back the ownership. It's my life. And just because someone's showing interest, I don't have to follow suit. I can decide for me whether or not this works, whether or not this is what I want.
And how far into the relationship did you tell him about your past?
Oh my God. Because he was really open. I mean, that's one thing that I thought was very endearing. He was so open. And I was a bit surprised that I've dated and I've never had anyone tell me. I had to always dig and find out about their past or anything about them. Whereas for him, I didn't have to ask. He just told me and I thought, oh, wow. And because he did, I felt like, okay, this is kind of nice, But I didn't feel like I needed to tell him. I just wanted to at some point. But I think in a few months when we were like really dating and we knew it was like exclusive. It wasn't just dating, It was a relationship. So I told him.
And what was his response?
He was shocked, very upset for me. And he said, don't you make me ever speak to him or see him or any of that. I might, have to like punch him. Like it won't be nice. Yeah. So yeah, he has never met him. I don't think he's even spoken to him for that matter. But I was surprised he was very supportive. Like in a sense that his tune didn't change just because I went through that. Instead, he was very loving, and he does the little things. Like he's the one who got me all the books that I needed to make sure I did the work I needed to. So he knew I needed a lot of like support. So there was all these books about how to survive being a rape victim. And I'm like, I don't like the word victim. I'm a survivor and I'm a fighter. So it was all these self-talk that I had was very positive. So he's like, okay, that's just one of the books, right? So he'd get me all these books on Kindle, and that was great. So I had all these resources, and he'd help me do my research, so to speak.
And that was really helpful alongside of the therapy, was it?
Of course, totally. But it's like, I felt like he was on, like even though I was doing a lot of work on my own, and even though I'm very communicative, I don't want to have to say every little thing that I was doing in therapy or I was going through, because I still wanted to have a normal relationship. So I didn't want to come back home and go, oh my God, you know what? I learned that. And that's how I felt. That's never been me. I'm more like sort of self-contained. I'll leave it to myself. And that's how I figure things out. So I'd still be very sort of normal coupley with him. But there would be a time when I'm like, okay, like when he would do his own reading or whatever. So I would sort of go into my own little bubble and figure things out. I had a lot of support though, nevertheless.
And I think that's so helpful, isn't it? And so important.
Yeah,
so
I think
people need to reach out and find that support.
Yeah, and
it's out there, whether it's friends or family or professionals.
Definitely. But I think a lot of people who survive rape or anything as traumatic as that, even being molested for that matter. I know of someone who went through something similar. Not similar, sorry, but went through being molested. Would take it very lightly. I never really went through the experience until a lot later. So would talk about it like it was no big deal. And I think that's not good. Like, don't downplay your stuff, because then you're not working on it, right? It's just like, yeah, so you know what? Yeah, this happened to me when I was like 5. No, it's you can't laugh about it or make it sound like it was nothing.
I think that's a coping mechanism for some people, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
So you shut out your emotions. That way you can't really cry. So you can start the healing process, because you need to engage your heart, right? You need to engage and go, oh my God, Ash, like really connect and go, okay, how did I feel? How did that, why did that happen to me? What was I going through that moment? So sort of going back into that scenario if need be. And I think a lot of people do that, and that's not right. It doesn't work. But the other thing that I've seen people do is jump from guy to guy and just sleep around, and just numb the pain by just being with anyone and everyone and thinking that's Mr. Right. But clearly, if anyone else look at it, knows it's not right.
Or turning to drugs and alcohol as well.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it may be, but they're turning to any addictive mechanism to cope with a very old childhood problem, for, most likely childhood. And that's, again, not going to work. Because at the end of the day, all these things are not going to sort it out, right? It's just a vicious cycle of one addiction to the other, like one problem to the other. So might as well go back and go, okay, where's all this coming from, And that's a hard question. It's painful.
Very painful and very difficult. And as somebody who hasn't experienced anything like that, I can't really imagine what it must be like. But
there's a lot of crying nights as a kid, a lot of crying nights. And you cry to sleep because you don't know how to make sense of anything. But school was like, I was super popular in school. So school was like, yay!
A safe haven?
Yeah, loved it. And I was just like, I didn't, I would love going to school. I'm sure I must have taken like sickies just for the hell of it. But yeah, it was fun. And I had friends and, you do stuff together. It was great. Interesting how I found ways to cope with it, though.
It just goes to show how you can compartmentalize your life even when you're young. So you've got that terrible issue that you're dealing with, but then you've got the fun of school and your friends.
And I think that's what kept me going. Because I had really good grandparents, even though they were really like protective and maybe a bit too overbearing in the sense of wanting so much out of me. But in hindsight, when I look at it, they had the right intention. They didn't do me any harm. They loved me like to bits, both of them. So I think I had that, and I had some really good friends, and I had some people that I turned to who were older to me, like a big sister. So I had that. So I think I had a lot of positives around me that really just made it easy in a sense to survive, and I think that's what kept me going. And I think for those who are not yet ready to get help, no judgment. make sure you have the right people around you that are not toxic, at least, and that are positive. They don't need to know about what's going on, but that you're around people who can build you, whether give you some sort of books to read or whether they're just happy and or they have a happy marriage, because that's what you want to see as well. Because I had a friend she's got a great marriage. She's more like a big sister. And I look up to her and I'm like, wow, that's what I want. And I'll tell her, I really admire the kind of mom you are and the kind of woman you are. And today she's like, I admire you for the person you become. Because she's seen me when I was like 16. But the point is, I had her as the benchmark of what, perfection looks like in that sense. So it's nice to have that, though.
Do you have aspirations to have children yourself?
No. Only because I have a lot of goals for myself. Like, there are a lot of things I want to achieve in life. And I think because I feel personally I started too late. I love kids, but I just I feel like they're going to get in the way, let's be honest. But at the same time, we did talk about wanting to adopt at some point, but we're not sure yet. So I think that because there's a lot more I want for myself in terms of my dreams and career. So I think, and a lot of it boils down to helping people, especially when it comes to trauma.
So that brings me to my question. If somebody is going through a trauma and needs some support and help and they're in Hong Kong, how could they get in touch with you?
Well, I've got a website called karinacalver.com. You can find me there. You can find me on Facebook. I'm there too. And I do freelance. I do counsel as well. And generally it's been with people with relationship problems because I feel a lot of relationship problems stems from something that went wrong in childhood, and I feel like not dealing with that, you grow up not only being picky about little things, you don't see the fuller picture, but also you don't realize what you're choosing, because you're not noticing what's right and wrong. It sounds really weird, but it's so true. Like, you can't see things for what they truly are. And so you either pick things because it seems right, but they're not, So I think, so one of the things I like to work on is relationships, but I also like to work with kids, i.e. Teenagers, or parent and child relationships, because I know from experience how damaging it can be. So that's why I'm a high school teacher and I love it. But at the same time, I also like helping people in the traumatic sense of events.
So you're a trained counsellor and a school teacher, and you do both at the moment. You work in a school, and you are also counselling as well.
Yeah.
Do you counsel in the school?
No, I don't, because it's a government school.
Okay.
Right. So you can't. I mean, everything's in Chinese, right?
Yeah.
But I do have sessions with them and just, we talk about stuff, but it's a lot more lighter.
And then you do just private counselling.
Yeah, private counselling.
Through your website.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the most important things I really wanted to focus on was it's so easy to get trapped and stuck by seeing only the problem or what we're facing. And it's really important to see that when you're out of it, and I know at that moment in time you can't really see it, but I can. And so I can say this for a fact that today I'm the woman I am because of that. And I think it's really important for people who are struggling to realize that there really is light at the end of the tunnel, but to also understand that it will take a lot of work. It might not be just 1 month. It might be a few years. But to understand that time is crucial, because only then can you come through. Because if you give up, then all that work is pointless. You know what I mean? But it's also like it doesn't get you anywhere, because then you're going to go back to square one. So it's really important to just stay persistent and keep doing all the work you need, getting all the therapy you need, talking to people who've gone through it, reading all the right books, getting a network going, and just keep at it. Because it makes a huge difference. And when you are where you are today, it'll be like when you get to the place you want to be, you'll be amazed.
I can feel your joy. I can feel your passion. I can feel that you are really happy with your life. And so you're such an inspiration for our listeners. And I hope that they will really take this on board and understand that philosophy works for anything. It doesn't just have to be for rape or traumatic events in the family. It can be when you're dealing with any sort of mental health issue. Anything that is really causing you to struggle in your life. Yeah. If you take the steps to get the support and the help and surround yourself with good people, there will be a point where you can be happy. And that's what you've got to hold on to. And that's hope. Yeah. Exactly. Keep hoping. Yeah. Keep the hope. Keep the faith.
Yeah. And keep knowing that it will get better. You know what I mean?
And you are not alone.
Exactly. Because I think people get so stuck in the fact that, okay, I'm not getting better. Yeah. And you won't. For a while, you may see no result. And that's okay too. Just the thing is, we shouldn't focus on the outcome. Just keep doing, because you know that recipe of doing will get you somewhere. And don't worry about where. Don't worry about when. Just keep doing the work. And that's the most important thing. And that's the hard part, is letting go and saying, okay, you know what? Why do I still do this? Why is this still happening? Why am I still attracting wrong men? Or why am I still feeling insecure? Stop all that sort of questioning, and just focus on, what do I need to work on? It's more about our choices too, right? We got to look at, why are we choosing that? What's going on inside? Why are we choosing to be miserable than to choosing to be happy? Why are we choosing men who mistreat us versus men who treat us nicely? So it's going down to, where is this all stemming from?
Karina, thank you so much. Thank you for talking to me today. Thank you for sharing your past, your life, your trauma, and your success.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been great to meet you.
Likewise, it's been beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's @Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.